Picture a wall of dark water as high as a 10-story building suddenly rising from the freezing ocean. This is officially known as a rogue wave, a terrifying monster of nature that destroys everything in its path. It is rushing violently toward a massive cargo ship that is carrying 20,000 heavy steel boxes today. The massive ship is trapped in the absolute worst, most violent weather environment on the entire planet Earth. The angry wind is howling like a wild animal, tearing at the tall stacks of metal containers constantly. The sky is completely black and the freezing rain is hitting the thick steel windows like sharp bullets. When the giant rogue wave finally hits the ship, the impact sounds exactly like a massive exploding bomb. Millions of tons of heavy, crushing ocean water violently wash completely over the entire front of the ship. For a few terrifying, completely silent seconds, the giant steel beast completely disappears underneath the dark, angry water. To any normal person watching this extreme violence, it seems completely impossible for the ship to ever survive. It looks exactly like the heavy steel monster is going to sink straight down to the dark bottom. But miraculously, the giant ship slowly pushes its nose back up through the heavy water and keeps sailing. This incredible moment creates a massive, mind-bending physical puzzle that confuses normal people every single passing day globally. If you take a heavy steel car and push it into a deep lake, it sinks completely instantly. The heavy car drops like a solid stone until it hits the absolute bottom of the quiet lake. So why does a massive, giant cargo ship made of the exact same heavy steel float so perfectly? How does a massive floating box that weighs hundreds of thousands of tons completely defeat the heavy ocean? The answer is an incredibly beautiful, complex mixture of ancient science, brilliant engineering, and raw mechanical pushing power. Today, we are going to completely rethink everything we know about massive ships and the deep blue ocean. We are going to unlock the brilliant, invisible scientific secrets that keep these giant metal beasts perfectly afloat. And we will discover exactly why they almost never sink, even in the absolute worst, most terrifying storms. To truly understand this giant miracle, we must first look at a famous scientific rule discovered long ago. A brilliant ancient scientist named Archimedes figured out the absolute most important rule of water many centuries ago. He discovered the incredible, invisible physical force that safely holds every single ship up on the ocean today. When you place any heavy object into a pool of water, the water must physically move out the way. The heavy object literally has to push the water aside to make a large, empty hole for itself. This simple action of pushing water away is officially known by smart scientists as the principle of displacement. But the water does not just politely move out of the way and stay completely quiet and still. The heavy water actually fights back and strongly pushes upward against the bottom of the invading heavy object. This massive, invisible, upward pushing force is officially called buoyancy, and it is the absolute key to floating. If the massive upward push of the displaced water is completely stronger than the downward pull of gravity, the heavy object will miraculously float perfectly and peacefully on the top of the rolling blue ocean surface. But if the downward gravity pull is stronger, the object will sadly sink to the dark, freezing bottom. A solid piece of heavy steel sinks because it is very small and compact for its massive weight. It does not push enough heavy water out of the way to create a strong, upward buoyant force. But smart ship engineers completely change the physical shape of the heavy steel to defeat the gravity pull. They take thousands of tons of heavy steel and stretch it out into a giant, wide, empty bowl. This giant, empty steel bowl pushes a massive, incredible amount of heavy ocean water completely out the way. Because it displaces so much water, the upward buoyant force pushing back is incredibly massive and entirely unstoppable, even though the outer skin of the massive cargo ship is completely built from incredibly thick, heavy steel. The entire massive inside of the giant ship is mostly filled with empty, completely weightless and invisible air. Air is much, much lighter and far less dense than the heavy, salty, freezing ocean water outside perfectly. When you combine the extremely heavy steel walls with the massive volume of empty air trapped safely inside, the overall total density of the giant ship becomes much lighter than the heavy water it sits upon. This brilliant, magical trick of density and displacement keeps the incredibly heavy ship safely floating on the surface. As long as the giant empty spaces inside the ship remain completely dry and completely filled with air, the massive cargo ship will never ever sink to the absolute bottom of the terrifying, dark ocean floor. But simply floating gently on a calm, flat, peaceful ocean is only the very first, incredibly simple step. Surviving a massive, violent storm is a completely different, highly dangerous, and terrifyingly complex physical battle for ships. When violent storms attack, giant waves angrily smash into the side of the massive ship with terrifying force. This creates a highly dangerous situation where the giant ship leans incredibly far over to one single side. If a giant ship rolls too far sideways, the heavy ocean water will pour directly onto the deck. The ship will completely lose its perfect balance, flip entirely upside down, and quickly sink into the darkness. To stop this absolute nightmare from happening, engineers designed the ship to have an incredibly low balancing point. This balancing point is scientifically called the center of gravity, and it must stay exactly near the bottom. If the top of the giant ship becomes heavier than the bottom, the ship will easily flip over. To prevent this, the giant ship is equipped with massive secret water tanks, completely hidden under the surface. These hidden underwater tanks are officially known as ballast tanks by professional, experienced cargo ship captains globally everywhere. When the massive ship is not carrying enough heavy cargo boxes to safely balance its giant, tall weight, the clever captain opens massive underwater valves to intentionally flood these bottom tanks with freezing heavy ocean water. This extra heavy water weight aggressively pulls the bottom of the ship firmly down toward the ocean floor. It acts exactly like the heavy lead weight at the absolute bottom of a bouncing, weeble-wobble punching toy. If an angry wave pushes the giant ship sideways, the heavy ballast immediately pulls it back upright safely. When the massive ship arrives at a busy port and loads thousands of new, heavy metal cargo boxes, the smart captain carefully pumps the heavy ballast water completely back out into the ocean to save weight. They brilliantly replace the heavy water weight exactly with the heavy weight of the new, valuable cargo boxes. But controlling the heavy weight is absolutely not the only way a giant ship survives a violent storm. The angry ocean also pushes the front of the massive ship violently up into the cold, dark sky. Then, the giant ship comes violently crashing back down into the deep valley of the dark, freezing water. This extremely dangerous, violent up-and-down seesaw movement is officially called pitching by brave, experienced sailors on the ocean. Pitching puts a massive, terrifying amount of physical bending stress directly on the middle of the steel ship. If the front and back are lifted high, the heavy middle part violently wants to crack and snap. To safely survive this extreme, brutal, bending stress, the massive ship is completely built to be highly flexible. The incredibly thick steel hull is officially designed to bend, flex, and twist safely without ever breaking apart. It moves gracefully and safely, exactly like a tall, strong tree, bending carefully in a massive, violent windstorm. If the giant steel ship was built completely rigid and extremely stiff, it would instantly crack and shatter. The extreme flexibility perfectly absorbs the brutal, violent shockwaves of the angry ocean during the absolute worst storms. But smart engineers also invented a brilliant mechanical trick to stop the pitching motion from becoming too dangerous. If you look closely at the very bottom front of a massive ship resting safely in dry dock, you will surprisingly see a giant, strange, round metal bump heavily sticking out directly below the waterline. This bizarre, giant metal nose is officially called a bulbous bow, and it is an absolute hydrodynamic masterpiece. When the heavy ship drives forward, this round metal bulb powerfully hits the dark, freezing ocean water first. It intentionally creates its very own special underwater wave completely ahead of the massive, heavy steel ship body. This special artificial wave perfectly crashes into the natural wave created by the actual bow of the ship. These two opposite waves completely cancel each other out, destroying the water's heavy resistance against the front hull. This brilliant cancellation effect allows the giant ship to glide incredibly smoothly through the rough, angry blue ocean. During a violent storm, the bulbous bow acts exactly like a giant, powerful shock absorber for the ship. It aggressively breaks up the incredibly powerful, destructive energy of incoming giant waves before they actually hit hard. It completely softens the terrible, violent impact, stopping the giant ship from pitching wildly and dangerously up high. But even with flexible steel and a smart, bulbous bow, the violent rolling motion remains a terrifying danger. To firmly stop the massive ship from rolling dangerously from side to side during a violent, heavy storm, smart engineers cleverly attached giant, movable metal fins directly to the outside bottom of the heavy steel hull. These giant metal fins look exactly like the long, aerodynamic wings of a fast commercial passenger airplane today. These special hidden underwater wings are officially called active fin stabilizers in the global marine engineering shipping industry. They are securely mounted deep underwater, completely invisible to anyone watching the ship from the safe, dry shore, and they are entirely controlled by incredibly smart, lightning-fast computer brains located deep inside the massive ship perfectly. When a giant, angry storm wave suddenly hits the right side of the massive, heavy cargo ship hard, the smart computer instantly senses the dangerous sudden movement and automatically tilts the giant metal fins very quickly. The fins quickly change their sharp angle to forcefully push back against the fast-rushing, incredibly heavy ocean water. The tilted fins create a massive, powerful underwater force pushing directly in the exact opposite, completely safe direction. They aggressively fight against the angry wave, perfectly cancelling out the highly dangerous rolling energy almost completely instantly. These brilliant active stabilizers can effectively reduce the violent rolling motion by an incredible, massive 90% totally. But what happens if the angry storm is simply too powerful and violently cracks the thick steel hull? What happens if freezing, salty ocean water actually begins to violently rush inside the empty, hollow air spaces? This is the absolute worst nightmare for any brave captain sailing the massive ship across the dangerous ocean. To absolutely stop this nightmare from destroying the giant ship, the inside structure is built completely, incredibly smart. The massive, empty inside is completely divided into many smaller, highly separate, tightly sealed empty metal storage rooms. These separate sealed metal rooms are officially called watertight compartments by the brilliant, highly educated, smart naval engineers. They are completely separated by incredibly thick, solid steel walls, officially known formally as heavy, strong marine bulkheads. These incredibly thick metal walls stretch from the absolute bottom of the ship all the way up perfectly. These heavy bulkhead doors are completely sealed shut tight with thick rubber gaskets and heavy, locking metal handles. If a violent storm wave aggressively smashes a massive, highly dangerous hole completely through the front steel side, the freezing ocean water will violently rush inside quickly, but it will only fill up one isolated room. The heavy, locked steel walls will completely trap the invading ocean water safely inside that one single compartment. The trapped water absolutely cannot travel or freely move into the other empty inside compartments of the ship. The rest of the giant ship remains completely dry, entirely empty, and perfectly light enough to keep floating. The massive ship might slightly lean to one side because of the heavy extra weight of trapped water. but it absolutely will not sink to the freezing, terrifying bottom of the dark, deep and dangerous ocean. This incredible puzzle of highly sealed metal boxes is the ultimate, final backup safety net for the crew. It perfectly guarantees that the massive steel beast will bravely stay afloat long enough to safely return home. Even with all these brilliant physical designs, a ship will only safely survive if it is packed correctly. A giant ship will only survive a violent storm safely if it is absolutely not dangerously overloaded completely. If you put too much heavy weight on the ship, it will sit far too low in water. If the heavy ship sits dangerously low, giant ocean waves will easily and violently wash completely over it. The freezing water will quickly flood the delicate ship, the perfect balance is lost, and the ship sinks. So, how does the brave captain know exactly when the giant ship is safely loaded to maximum capacity? To successfully prevent this terrifying overloading disaster, every single massive cargo ship has special magic lines painted brightly. These small, simple white lines are painted permanently on the outside steel wall everywhere around the massive ship. They are officially called the safety load lines or plimsoll lines, designed by smart engineers many years ago. The painted load lines are the absolute ultimate unbreakable visual safety guide for every single professional ship captain. They clearly show the exact maximum depth the heavy ship is safely allowed to sink into the water. But it is absolutely not just one simple line. There are actually multiple different lines painted very carefully. This is entirely because the deep ocean water completely changes its density depending heavily on the geographical location. Cold, freezing ocean water is much heavier, much denser, and much thicker than warm tropical ocean water entirely. Salty, deep ocean water is much heavier and much denser than completely fresh water floating in a river. Because heavy, cold, salty water is extremely dense, it physically pushes upward with a much more powerful force. The giant ship will actually float much higher in the freezing, highly salty Atlantic Ocean winter storm perfectly. But if that exact same heavy ship sails into a warm, completely fresh tropical river, it sinks lower. The safety load lines clearly show the absolute exact maximum safe loading weight for every single changing environment. The brave captain constantly looks at the painted lines to completely guarantee the massive ship is never overloaded. As long as the dark, freezing water never covers the painted safety line, the giant ship easily survives. But the incredibly strong steel and cleverly painted lines are only one important survival part of the puzzle. The massive ship also desperately relies on incredibly advanced modern digital technology to survive the absolute worst storms. In the deep ancient past, sailors had to completely blindly guess exactly when a violent storm bravely approached. Today, a massive modern cargo ship is completely equipped with highly advanced, incredibly powerful digital weather radar screens. These smart computer systems can clearly see a terrifying, violent storm forming many hundreds of miles far away. The captain instantly receives highly detailed, brightly colorful digital weather maps, completely updated every single passing quiet minute. The extremely smart computers precisely calculate the exact size, terrifying speed, and destructive physical direction of the storms. With this incredibly powerful, absolute life-saving information, the smart ship captain can make highly brilliant, safe routing decisions. They can intentionally steer the giant ship completely around the absolute worst, highly dangerous weather in the ocean. This smart, safe avoidance process is officially called careful weather routing by professional ocean sailors globally everywhere today. It successfully prevents the massive ship from ever actually testing its absolute maximum physical steel limits in combat. Sometimes, the absolute best, most effective way to safely survive a giant storm is simply just avoiding it. The massive modern cargo ship is also completely packed with tiny, highly sensitive electronic strain and stress sensors. These incredibly tiny sensors are permanently glued tightly to the thick steel hull, massive fins, and heavy engine. They constantly, accurately monitor the extreme, invisible physical stress placed heavily on the massive steel plates every second. If a giant wave bends the steel body more than it safely should, the ship's sensors instantly detect the danger. Inside the bridge, warning systems show the captain how much stress the hull is taking. The crew does not panic. They adjust the ship's speed, direction, and angle against the waves, because in a storm, speed can save the ship, but it can also destroy it. If the ship moves too fast, the front can slam down into the water with brutal force. If it moves too slowly, the waves can turn it sideways and make it dangerously unstable. So the captain carefully finds the safest balance. The goal is not to defeat the ocean. The goal is to move with it. Deep below the deck, the engine keeps pushing the massive ship forward. During a storm, this engine gives the ship control. Without engine power, the ship cannot steer properly, and the ocean can push it sideways. That is why modern ships have backup generators, backup pumps, and emergency control systems. If one system fails, another one can take over. But power alone is not enough. The containers on the deck must also stay locked in place. Each container is held down with twist locks, steel rods, and strong lashing systems. In calm weather, they look silent and harmless, but during a storm, every container becomes a heavy weight trying to shift, slide, or break free. If too much weight moves to one side, the ship can lose balance. That is why cargo is carefully planned before the ship ever leaves port. The heaviest containers are placed lower, and the lighter containers are stacked higher, and the total weight is balanced from front to back and side to side. So when a giant rogue wave crashes over the bow, the ship may disappear for a few terrifying seconds, but the hidden science keeps working. The trapped air keeps it light, and the displaced water pushes upward. The ballast pulls the bottom down, and the steel hull flexes instead of breaking. The compartments stop flooding from spreading, and the engine pushes the giant ship forward again. Slowly, the bow rises out of the dark water, and the ship shakes off the ocean, and it keeps moving toward the horizon. That is why a heavy steel car sinks in a lake, but a massive cargo ship can cross the most violent oceans on Earth. Not because it breaks the laws of physics, but because it uses those laws perfectly.